Howdy, of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Misfits. This is season 2, an entire 7 episode review that I'm going to try and do here. I kind of like this season approach. It kind of feels like in this season they did not waste a lot of time. I also do like we have Curtis here, who we go through this entire rung of story, and then Curtis goes back in time and then just adjusts things. So people could say it's like, man, that kind of is a little bit of annoyance where we have to go through an entire long stretch of story for eventually to have Curtis just go back in time and correct a simple thing to tell people, hey, yeah, don't do this, and then they don't do it, and then carry on with story. I think there is quite a bit of interesting things going on in this season, but also I would say that the things that they are also doing are kind of, I guess, better story than the first season. I guess we can give them that. And so we go on here and we can really see how in the first season things just kind of consistently, from first episode to last episode, there wasn't a real true escalation of anything. It was all just one seemingly like one flat approach to the first season, where I think in this second season we can start seeing an escalation of things, and I thought that that was really interesting. So I would say that this season could quite possibly have gotten better, but I can also say, well, there were some things I wasn't exactly sold on, or there were some things that I thought were just for purpose of doing a different kind of season, that we had to either break people up, add people in, or have to write this story a certain way. I honestly think the way that this season 2 ends, I honestly think is really awesome. I really enjoyed how this season 2 ends, because it ends with a cliffhanger for you to be fascinated to see where exactly every single one of these characters are going to head and what is going to happen to every single one of these characters. It'll be interesting to see how season 3 is to play out, knowing how season 2 ended. So there is also a side to me where, going into these episodes, I knew things were also going to blow up in these characters' faces, and I was just waiting for that pen to drop. And so there is going to be some mysteries afoot within this season, but I think reasonably there are a lot of stuff where I feel this season can be bottled within itself, and then they can go a completely different direction in season 3 or whatever. It kind of feels that they do give us a little bit of closure on the first season going into the second season, and I could applaud them for that. I really do like. I think that this show is kind of overall winning me over, even though in all actuality I'm like, man, this show goes all kinds of goofy directions. And I think the goofier which it heads, the more I can just appreciate this show and just be like, you know what, this show is just fun. The show is just fun. Especially when we get to the tail end of the season where we have a guy with goofy powers that is going to be this episode's or this tail end of this season's villain, which I thought this guy's power against this team, I'm like, really? I'm like, okay, all right, let's go into this. So let's go into spoilers about this episode. Again, I'm kind of going without a safety net in this season, because normally I would go and have all the list of character names. I'm kind of doing without that and just going with the episode guide. So I hope that's going to guide me into understanding what all is to go on within this episode, or within these episodes, to give you kind of a lineup of what all happens within the season. So if you guys do not know, check out the first season. You can kind of get a heads up of what this show even is if you do not know what it is. And so this season, we are really just going into the odd spectrum of people that had been inflicted by being into the same storm as these community service people, and they are to go and see wild different spectrums of people who have powers. And I could applaud these people for all the odd approaches that they did, because like, man, this is really fun. This show is actually really fun. It doesn't feel like this is a show that is copying and pasting a lot of superhero shows. Plus, you have also these characters are kind of people that you could also hate. And just be like, no, don't kill that person. No, don't. No, don't brutally kill that. Like, but man, was this season fun, especially when we get to the video game episode where we have a character that has a video game theme going on. Man, was that episode really fun. So let's go into, if we haven't already, let's go into that double five. So I'm enjoying the show. So let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time I'm going to spoil this episode. So in the first season, we left off with Nathan being buried alive. So we seemingly have a hooded individual with a mask to cover his face, and he's wearing all kinds of bizarrish, I don't know what exactly kind of gear this is. It kind of looks between a mixture of like paintball and all kinds of other weird bizarrish getup. And so we have this individual that is taking a piece of paper and shooting out this piece of paper to Kelly to tell her to return to Nathan's grave. So it seems that we have the entire team return to Nathan's grave, and it seems that Nathan had not tried to dig his way out or try to get somehow out of this grave. And so we have to where Kelly and the group go to Nathan's grave, and Kelly ends up hearing Nathan jerking it in his coffin. And so Kelly is hearing Nathan's thoughts from underground. And so she is like, oh my god, Nathan's still alive. So they end up digging Nathan out. Man, I don't know what it is, but Nathan had like the cheapest coffin, and he wasn't even wearing actual he wasn't wearing he was just wearing street clothes. I was like, man, did they even have a funeral for Nathan? Did it seemed like they just shoved him in a box and said, "Okay, here you go, kid." So we have Nathan being unveiled, and Nathan is faking being dead. But then eventually he sprungs and says, "Hey, yeah, I'm alive!" And so the entire group freaks out. And Nathan says, "Haha, look at me. I found out what my superpower is. I'm immortal. Yeah, I'm immortal." And so we have it to where everyone is like, "Oh, well, hey, that's great." And so we end up finding out that Nathan had crapped himself when he had died. And so we go on, and so that was the kind of first half of this episode. And we are to bizarrely question how exactly Kelly was to get this information to go to Nathan's grave, but it is what it is. So we bizarrely have it to where the group is to go and to be under new uh, community service management. I believe there is some guy watching them. I believe his name is, I think, Sean, but I could be wrong about that. So we have this new community manager that could not give a single F about anything that these kids are doing. Like, to him, it's just like, I can't wait to collect this paycheck kind of thing. But it seems that eventually this community manager is, or community whatever service manager, is also using these kids to do his own bidding. At one point in one episode, he wanted them to go and wash his car because he's technically a part of this community, and this community manager guy wants his car cleaned. So we introduce this new community service manager, and so we have this guy telling these kids what to do. Plus, he says like, "Yeah, I guess I'm just your new community service manager because the other two had gone missing." Whatever. Who cares? So we have it to where in this episode, this manager, I'll just call him the manager for the rest of this season. So this manager goes and tells these kids to go and, I guess, watch over these people that are painting. It seems we end up finding a girl named Lucy, and it seems that this Lucy girl is tied to Simon. It seems Lucy had gotten a screw loose and had gotten to be in a psych ward of sorts, and I guess Simon had previously been in there as well after the thing that had happened with him to get him to be into doing community service. So we right away find out that Lucy's power is to be able to completely 100% mimic a person. So we have Lucy who changes into Aisha, and so we have her going and talking to Simon, and so Aisha is to go and to start taking off her clothes, and eventually go and unzip Simon's jumpsuit to give him a BJ. And Simon is like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, why are you doing this? I thought you were with Curtis. And so Aisha's saying, no, I'm not with him. Things are working out. I want to be with you. And this thing here between Simon and Aisha is to basically set up this entire season, because it seems like these two characters are to end up with one another throughout this entire season, bizarrely. I guess they were trying to figure out what the heck to do new for this season. And so the very first interaction of this season led them to just go, you know what, how about we just put these two together bizarrely anyways? F it, we'll figure it out. So, weirdly and bizarrely. So, because we also have at some point Curtis uh, going forward in time where we find out that Curtis goes forward in time now, and he had a girlfriend that he met on some rooftop somewhere for him having some superhero costume, and this girl heading into and saying, "Hey, yeah, I'm gonna basically be your girlfriend." But we'll get to that. We'll get to that later. So we have it seemingly where Aisha ends up turning back to Lucy, and so Simon ends up going and talking to Aisha, and Aisha's like, "What are you talking about? Dude, I didn't give you a BJ. I didn't do anything for you. What are you talking about?" Because Simon is asking Aisha out, and Aisha wants nothing to do with Simon. And so we have Simon telling Nathan, hey, Aisha gave me a BJ. And Nathan's like, oh my god, yeah, good for you. And eventually it gets around that Aisha had given Simon a BJ, and Curtis ends up catching wind of it, and he's like, like, what did you do to my girl? Because we have Lucy playing as Aisha, and Aisha looks all beaten up and bruised, and Aisha says that Simon had beaten her up. And so Curtis goes to Simon to confront him about this, and we have Lucy, who is now playing Nathan. And so we have to where Simon is trying to get rid of Sally's body, the former community service manager. Simon is trying to get rid of this body, and we have it to where the entire group is going to find out that Sally was in this freezer, and Simon had killed this girl. So, because Simon has her in a wheelbarrow, and eventually everyone starts to realize there is a body in this wheelbarrow. And so, because we have Lucy notice that there's an arm poking out of this wheelbarrow, and so we have to where the entire group realizes that Nathan is now Lucy, and so because Nathan supposedly leaves, which actually wasn't Nathan, and Nathan ends up coming from another room and saying, oh, hey guys, how's it going? And so they end up finding out and or realizing that someone is mimicking this group. And so they all decide to have some bizarrish catchphrase or whatever to say that they all are who they are. But the problem with that is when someone is to shout out the catchphrase, that is to tell the mimicked person what to exactly say. So we have it to where they are scrambling to find this Lucy, and eventually they think it's any number of people. At some point, they even think that it is their new community service manager, and they go and start beating this guy up and this community service manager and killing him. And so Curtis goes back in time to prevent them from killing this guy because he is to tell them, no, that's not actually really him. And so we go on to think that Lucy had transformed into being a rat. And so these guys take so much time going and trying to kill a rat, but that's not even Lucy either. So we eventually go into here and eventually find that Nathan went with Simon, and this Simon is actually the clone, and so is actually Lucy. And so we have it to where Simon eventually goes to be arrested by this cop and to be held for information to try and give up some stuff about what is to go on with this group. And so we end up having Lucy Simon and Simon Simon going, and so Lucy is saying, well, hey, like, I would have wanted you to really, in all actuality, be my friend. And Simon is like, well, you know what, I am your friend. Like, I would try to be very much for or with you and whatever. Simon tries to make amends with Lucy, and eventually it seems that Lucy is won over by Simon, and so Lucy does not rat Simon out, and so it seems that everything in the end ends up working out. And so Lucy ends up going on her own way, and everything seems to have turned out fine for this group. Nobody got ratted on, so on and so forth. So within the next episode, we end up finding out all of a sudden that Nathan has a brother from a shared father, because evidently Nathan's father had been setting up franchises, I guess, and having another son that Nathan did not know about. So we have to where we find out that Nathan and Nathan's brother are seemingly going to hang out within this episode. Nathan, we find out that he had taken his biological father, shoved him into a trunk of his car because he wanted his biological father to go back to Nathan's brother's mother to make amends for all the wrongdoing that he has ever done to his mother. And so we have Nathan going and having to go and find this car because this car had been stolen and had been gone missing. Because Nathan and his brother go to a bar at first and drink their way to oblivion and are starting to look at girls and stuff like that. It seems that they are seemingly hitting it off. And so when Nathan and his brother are to go back to their car. Their car has gone missing, to where Nathan's brother has to mention that, hey, yeah, Dad was in the trunk, so now we have to retrieve this car for us to retrieve our dad. So we eventually find this car, and there seems to be a number of thugs that are to be present within this moment here. And so, and here's also an interesting thing. I think in the very first episode with Lucy, we have we had it to where Lucy ended up as Simon killing killing Nathan because he ends up being rammed into a pipe of sorts, which I thought was really interesting. And so Nathan's like, you know what, this only hurts when I breathe. And so it seems that eventually when Nathan died, they were easily able to take Nathan and get him off this pipe. So when he was to be immortal and come back to life, I'm kind of interested to see what happens with Nathan in season 3. What does he go and do for this season? And plus, it'll be interesting to see if any number of these characters have a couple of different superpowers. Maybe if there is an escalation of powers within this season compared to the other one. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens with story, I'm hoping. So going on here, so we have Nathan and Nathan's brother who end up retrieving this car away from these thugs and eventually get their father out of the trunk to have cops follow this car and arrest both Nathan and Nathan's brother. But Nathan's biological father doesn't want to press any charges, and so we have it to where Nathan and his brother go out to some rave somewhere, and or they also go to this bar, which leads them to eventually going to a rave. And so we find out that Nathan bumps into some bartender girl where it seems that she has some power of sorts, that she can either freeze people or she can light them on fire, which is really interesting. So we have to where Nathan tells this girl that has this ice power, he's like, oh man, that's really cool. And this bartender's like, oh no, you're not freaked out by this? Nathan's like, no, hey, no, I'm immortal. Like you and me, powers. Hey, isn't that awesome? So we have to where this girl goes and immediately follows Nathan to say, hey, here's my digits. Let's go out sometime. And so we have it to where these people all go out to this rave of sorts, or this club of sorts, and they all end up taking drugs. And this drug has a severe effect on all of these people's powers. And so we have to where Nathan's brother ends up with this bartender, and Nathan's brother and this bartender go into this car, and this girl is complaining on how she is running a little bit too hot, which means she is all of a sudden starting to touch Nathan's brother, and like flames are starting to appear upon this guy's skin, which I'm like, oh crap. So we have it to where Nathan is heading out, and we end up noticing a car getting way too hot, meaning fire is appearing, and eventually this car explodes. So we are to find out that seemingly Nathan's brother had seemingly gone away from this car explosion. And so Nathan's brother tells Nathan to, hey, you got to make amends with dad. You got to be able to kind of squash this whole grudge that you have had against him. And so Nathan goes out of his way to talk to his dad, but it really seems that there's no real, true, legitimate squashing of anything. It just feels that nothing is ever going to change, nothing is going to be different, and Nathan basically tells his brother that. And so we have it to where Nathan is telling his father about, well, my brother wanted to have me come here to talk to you, and Nathan's father saying, well, how could he have told you that? Because I had gotten news that he had died last night from a car accident. So we end up finding out that Nathan's brother is actually now a ghost. So I guess since Nathan is immortal, he can see ghosts now. If anyone is to die, Nathan is to see them. So I'm like, they pull the exact same thing with Umbrella Academy, where Nathan, who's in Umbrella Academy, saw ghost people in that show. So I'm like, what, did they just copy and paste and say, hey, yeah, I saw the show Misfits where this guy talked to ghost people, so let's just cast him in this show because he's doing the exact same thing. Interesting. So, going on here, we have seemingly we have to push on. So we go on and have Aisha, who is to seemingly try and get herself into trouble within this episode, and this masked hooded vigilante is to go and try to save her consistently. And so this masked vigilante is to start to help these people with their tasks. If at before he was just a parkourist that they could have saw or seen from time to time, now it seems that this parkourist is having a much more prominent role and even helping these people out in this story. So we have Aisha, who is going and trying to get mugged, and this hooded individual is helping her, to where the second time around Aisha ends up falling down a flight of stairs, and so the hooded masked individual takes her to his hideout, and we actually get to see who this masked marauder is, which I thought was interesting. But we'll get to that. So this entire episode is to have a tattoo artist that seems to be putting his ink into anyone that I guess he does not like, or he wants to manipulate, or he wants to do any number of things. So we have Kelly going to this tattoo artist to fix up her tattoo that she has on her back. And so while that is to go on, we have seemingly Nathan making fun of this tattoo artist, mentioning how stupid some of his tattoos are and that are on his body. And so we have it to where this tattoo artist ends up imprinting onto Nathan that he is all of a sudden going to have to be seemingly gay, because it seems that Kelly and Nathan were starting to have a relationship here, and it seems that this was going to happen, but it didn't exactly. Even when it seems like there was a possibility of Nathan and Kelly getting together, it just seems that there was never a good enough time to really put these two together, or even when they slightly did, they slightly just dissolved it to just be like, well, yeah, I guess Nathan isn't going to be the right guy for Kelly. And even when he tries to put his fingers inside of her to see where this relationship is going to go, Kelly is immediately just like, you know what, I don't think that this relationship is going to work. And so you might as well not even try. And so Nathan pulls away and he's like, well, I guess this is just not going to work. So we find out that Nathan seemingly is forcibly attracted to Simon, and so Nathan is throwing himself at Simon, and they are having a get together. We have Nathan trying to put the moves on Simon, kissing Simon, and all kinds of things. And Simon is so off-putted and so awkward by this that he ends up running off. And so we eventually have Kelly getting wind of this. And so Kelly confronts Nathan and says, dude, are you gay? And Nathan's like, straight, gay, retarded, why do we have to put labels on anything? And so we have it to where Nathan is seemingly smitten with Simon, saying that Simon completes him and all kinds of bizarre stuff. Doesn't make any sense. Eventually we find out that Nathan has a back tattoo that says Simon on it. And so Kelly ends up going to this tattoo artist to say, you know what? I think you're the cause of Nathan all of a sudden absurdly wanting to be gay. And so Kelly confronts this tattoo artist to eventually get a tattoo of Vince, which is this tattoo artist's name, on her back. And so Kelly is very much infatuated with this tattoo artist. And so, because of this, we have it to where the team is going, you know what? I think we really need to look into this tattoo artist. There's something about this guy that just rubs me the wrong way. And so, they end up going to this tattoo artist, and we have this masked marauder giving them bizarrely these salted peanuts, or these unsalted something peanuts. And so Simon is trying to figure out exactly why they were given peanuts. And so we have it to where the group goes to this tattoo artist and tells him, hey, you gotta fix this. You gotta be able to reverse this. And so, of course, this tattoo artist instead goes and again tries to ink more people, hurting Curtis, and then eventually Simon ends up getting inked of a barbed wire onto his neck. And so we have Simon, who has the peanut bag, who ends up luckily tossing the peanut bag, or the peanut one peanut from this bag, luckily going into seemingly the tattoo artist's mouth, and we have it to where I guess this tattoo artist was allergic to peanuts, and so this guy I guess goes into anaphylactic shock or whatever the heck that is when you eventually have an allergy that is whatever. So we have it to where this tattoo artist is to die, which kind of nullifies the whole tattoo thing and kind of removes the curse, so to speak. So everyone eventually becomes fine. But all while we have Alicia, who is to seemingly find or be awakened to go on to this hooded man's headquarters, and we find out that this hooded man is none other than Simon from the future. So I'm assessing or assuming that Simon probably now quite possibly could have a time travel power, because he can't have Curtis's power, which is rewinding time, because Simon would have to rewind time to, and no, like, this is a future Simon in the same time period of his past self. So what I'm assessing is that quite possibly towards the tail end of this season, I'll say it, we have it to where everyone is to supposedly be getting different superpowers. And so I'm assessing that quite possibly Simon chose to maybe instead of being invisible, he I guess chose to be able to time travel, but there might be more superpowers than we are to assume or assess, because supposedly towards the tail end of this season we have it to where there seems to be a guy that can buy or sell people's powers, basically having it to where, hey, if you want a superpower you can get it. And that's what makes this tail end of this season really interesting. I really enjoy it. And so we'll see how many superpowers everyone has in the next season. Whether Nathan could be still immortal, or maybe he has laser eyes, or maybe he has any number of things. It would actually be pretty funny if Nathan had the power of being different people, because I think if Nathan had the power of being different people, I think there would be a lot of hilarious things that Nathan could pull off if he were to be different people, and like, I think that might be a fun power. But anyways, so it'll be interesting to see what Nathan's power is, because we had a bulk of the first season having him trying to decipher what his power is, and in this season he has a lot of fun with his power, and so it'll be interesting to see what power Nathan has in the next season. So we'll see what that all is. So we have to where Aisha finds out that it's future Simon as this hooded individual. And so we go on into finding out that there is seemingly new people that are to appear within this community service environment. We find out that there is some new guy named Ollie that has a teleportation power. But sadly enough, this guy does not last very long. So So we have, I believe, within this episode, and I could be wrong about this. This could be the. I believe this is the video game episode, and I think I could be wrong about this. But, anyways, so we have a guy that otherwise goes into this community service thing, and he is playing a video game character. And so we end up having Ollie ending up getting gunshot. Uh, and so this guy ends up dying as part of this other guy's video game. And so we have it to where the community service guys are to be seemingly involved with this video game guy that wants his money, and he's going and kidnapping Kelly to hold her for ransom until they are to give him his money. And so while that is going on, we have the entire group before all this going and finding out that this future Simon could be living at this certain house. But instead, we end up having Curtis going into this home where they assume this future Simon is, which he actually is not. But instead, we have Curtis bumping into this girl named Nikki, and Nikki is a girl that seems to be needing a heart transplant. So we have Nathan crapping in Nikki's bed, and because Nathan assumed that this apartment was for this future Simon guy, but it wasn't. And so Nathan craps in this bed, and so Nikki now complains about, hey, Nathan crapped in my bed, and now I need to have a new mattress. And so Curtis does the right thing and buys her pajamas. But I'm like, dude, you should have bought her bed sheets. You should have bought her brand new bed sheets. That's not gonna remove. Anyways, so we have it to where Curtis is trying to win this girl over because he knows that he is going to end up with her within the future. And so we also have it to where Aisha is with Simon, and Simon is basically telling Aisha that him and her are to end up with one another. And it seems that future Simon can touch Aisha, even though she has the ability to touch someone and they want her for sex reasons. So we have it to where seemingly Simon has some kind of counter power to where he can touch Aisha and he won't be forced into sex with her. So, but bizarrely, we have Simon, future Simon, who ends up having sex with Aisha anyways, and we have it to where Aisha is like, oh my god, like, this is actually great to have a person that doesn't have to fall into the fray of my powers. It's kind of like if Rogue found a person where Rogue doesn't suck the life out of them when they touch them. It's kind of the same thing. So we have Simon saying, hey, you can't tell present time me that I am this guy and whatever. You can't tell him anything. So we eventually have Aisha who goes to Simon and apologizes for a lot of things and also appreciates that Simon tried to get rid of Sally and so on and so forth. Aisha is really trying to make amends and trying to win over Simon and saying, hey, like, maybe we can hang out sometime and stuff along those lines. And so we have it to where Aisha is going to Curtis, and slowly but surely they are going to break up. It seems that Aisha is not exactly interested in Curtis anymore, and it seems that slowly but surely they are transitioning Curtis into finding a different girlfriend anyways. So it seems like both of these people are at a point in their lives right now that they really don't really need one another, because we have Aisha going to Curtis as Curtis is telling Aisha, hey, let's go into the storage room and do what we would normally do, which is to jerk it between one another. And Aisha's like, you know what? Is this all that we're ever gonna do? Is this all that we're kind of relegated to do for one another? Like, come on, is this ever gonna be more than this? And so I think when Aisha is kind of asking where this relationship is going, I think Curtis is really realizing that, like, well, maybe this relationship really actually isn't going anywhere. So we have it to where Aisha and Curtis are kind of in mid action, and Aisha is asking Curtis, like, okay, well, where is this relationship going? And Curtis is like, you know what? I think that, like, we're just going to resolve this relationship. And so they break up. Aisha is kind of slowly but surely looking at Simon, going, you know what? I think it's time for me and Simon to just kind of hook it up. So we have it to where, so this guy is living his own video game, and it seems that we have the future Simon giving this group the video game of which this guy is copying and pasting his life on. And so we have to where Simon is playing a different role that this video game guy wanted him to play. And so we have it to where seemingly we find out this guy is holding Kelly, and she's putting on a wedding dress for this guy, and he is telling her that she has some role that she's to play, that it's like that she had been his former girlfriend and that she had lied to him and cheated on him and all kinds of other things. And so we eventually have Kelly like hung up on some meat hooks, and we eventually find one by one as this group is to go and try to steal money with Simon using his power to steal money to get money for this guy. It seems that the completion of this level is not over, or this story, and so this video game guy is to now say, hey, one of you are the undercover cop, and now I have to figure out who the undercover cop is. So we have this video game guy who is now going to string every single one of these group up and have them on these meat hooks, and we have this video game guy who is going to chainsaw every single one of these people up, because any one of them could be the undercover cop. So we eventually have Aisha getting free from these meat hooks, and she ends up running off, and the video game guy is to chase her down. So while that is going on, we have the hooded future Simon making his way to Aisha, and he ends up dropping down in front of Aisha before she is to get shot. And future Simon tells this guy that future Simon was the undercover cop. And so this video game guy ends up going on to his next level and just leaving. And so Aisha says, "Oh my god, like we have to figure out a way to have stopped you from getting this bullet." And Simon says, "No, this was the reason why I came back. This is the whole entire thing of why I did this, to protect Aisha from getting killed." And so Simon is telling Aisha that she has to burn Simon's body once he dies. And so Aisha does so Simon won't know that Simon had died. So we go along here, and we eventually find out that Nikki is getting a heart transplant, and it is, of course, the heart transplant of the guy who had teleported. So she ends up teleporting herself, and she teleports into finding this group, and she ends up helping getting them down off this meat hook, and so on and so forth. So we seemingly have Nikki, who is going to be tied to this team, and interestingly enough, eventually she is to eventually die into this season. And so I'm kind of interested to see if Curtis went back and saved her or not, because he was going to try and do that. So we have it within the next episode that there's an entire episode where Nathan is to be bizarrely murdered in the very beginning of this episode. I guess because Nathan had went into a locker room with this new girl that seems to have a bizarrish daddy issue. And so we have it to where Nathan goes and sees this girl undressing in this locker room, and he shortly thereafter that ends up winding up dead, or what is to be equivalent of Nathan being dead, because he can't die. So Nathan ends up going and saying, "Hey, somebody tried to kill me in the locker room, and somebody might be next. Maybe it might be a tie to this girl here, because the last thing I remember is talking to this girl, and moments later I ended up dead." So this girl ends up talking to Simon, and eventually her and Simon are to eventually go off to do some costume party. And so we also have it to where within this episode that Kelly ends up going and finding a new boyfriend of her own, which we end up finding out this boy is very nice, but eventually gets a little bit too aggressive in the bedroom business department. And so Kelly ends up kind of being really upset with this guy, but eventually we end up finding out that this guy has powers, and we'll find out what that power really is. So because we end up finding out that this guy is not actually a guy. Instead, this guy is a ape. And so Kelly had been having a boyfriend that was an ape this entire time. And here's the thing that really didn't make sense. How is it that this guy had an apartment if he was an ape all along? That didn't make any sense to me. So, moving on. So, we go along here, and they're at this costume party, and everybody's wearing their superhero costumes. And so we have Curtis, who finds out that his superhero outfit was that he was wearing, that was to say that he was to see something in the future. He was to see this exact same scene play out within this party. And so Curtis goes to this rooftop to talk to Nikki, and to find out that Nikki is interested in Curtis, and so on and so forth. So Simon is to go to this uh, portion of party to go to the bathroom. And so it seems that since this has a father that seems to not like any person that looks at his daughter the wrong way, he goes out and tries to kill Simon, but by accident he ends up killing a guy that looks just exactly like Simon. And so they end up finding out who exactly the killer is. And so we end up having it to where eventually Simon goes off with this girl to eventually start making out, and this father goes and tries to go after Simon, and Aisha ends up taking a fire extinguisher and bumping this guy on the head, which kills this guy. And so everything seems to eventually be resolved at the tail end of this. So kind of quickly, kind of moving on here. So episode 6 goes on to having these guys all talking about, boasting about, hey guys, we all have superpowers. And it seems that there are starting to have some people here and there that are actually going public about them having superpowers. So we have it to where Nathan and all the guys are mentioning, hey, why don't we go public with our superpowers? And so we end up having the community service manager hearing about this while he's in the bathroom stall, and he's like, well, you know what, I'm gonna go and talk to somebody and have like the news all come here to promote these people. And so we end up finding out that there was some kid who can control milk and be able to manipulate milk somehow, which is the weirdest power ever, but it is what it is. So it seems that this milk kid was otherwise approached by this agent person, and so it seems that this agent woman eventually approaches this entire group of these community service people because they are kind of at the very tail end of their community service anyways, and it seems like there are just days left for them to be done with this. And Nathan is thinking about how he won't have a job or a home or an anything once this all ends. And so we eventually have it to where this entire community service goes to this agent girl, and they're like, well, hey, how about if theoretically we ended up killing a couple people, and what is going to happen to that? And the agent person says, well, more than likely, if you had to kill a person, it was probably in self defense. So, if anything, you can probably get away with a lot of murders and stuff like that. And we're just going to try to pay people off and sweep everything under the rug. And so these kids are all just like, yeah, this is awesome. We're going to get away with anything. We're going to get away with murder. And so we have these community service people just going, hey, sure, I'm willing to uh, be a part of this agent, whatever thing, this kind of new, whatever we're doing here. And so we have it to where these kids are all going and going viral. Basically, The news is clamoring about them. We have Nathan, who's doing a TV special where he's going to take a bullet to the head, and so on and so forth. So we have it to where eventually Nathan is to bump into some healer, and Nathan's living the high life, sleeping with all kinds of women, and so he ends up finding out he ends up getting an STD on his schwanz. So he goes to this healer to try to heal his Johnson, and we have this healer saying, "You know what? I'm not gonna go and feel anybody's privates. I'm sorry. That's just the one thing I'm never going to do." And so we have it to where this agent is going to this milk manipulator guy and saying, "You know what? Like, I'm starting to get a lot of high end people coming to me. And so, you know what? Your power is the stupidest one. So I'm just going to let you go." And so this manipulator guy ends up going and, in a very Magneto like fashion, ends up taking whatever dairy that is in a person's system and is ending up basically choking them with it, or manipulating their bodies to where they end up dying somehow or another. Like, to the point where even when this guy is to go to Nathan, he ends up kind of figuring out a way to turn Nathan into a vegetable for the rest of his life. So we end up having this dairy guy. He ends up being a villain for this episode, and he's going and trying as much as humanly possible to kill every single person because he, I guess, wants to be the only superpowered person in town, to where everyone is going to clamor to want to be able to work with this dairy guy, I guess. So we have it to where this dairy guy is killing everybody. He ends up killing the healer, to where she ends up falling on some award that she had done and kills herself. And Nathan ends up going, "Oh my god, hey, rub yourself so you can heal yourself, rub yourself," and so on. So we end up having Nathan talking to Simon the next day and saying, "You know what? Like, after talking to that healer girl, you know what? My schwanz is perfectly fine, like a new penny or a new pen or whatever." So we eventually end up finding out that this dairy guy is killing people one after the other, and Simon is kind of being invisible and trying to hide out from everybody. And so Aisha talks to Nathan and mentions about something that Simon had said, and Simon says, "Well, that's a little inaccurate." And Simon follows Aisha all the way back to her hideout to find out that future Simon had given Aisha information, and Aisha basically has to tell Simon everything. And so we have it to where Simon is really looking and seeing his future self as like, well, my future self is better than who I am. And so Simon is trying to be just like his future self, and he is having problems. Simon is trying to satisfy Aisha, and things are not working out. And so, yeah, there's just a lot of problems that are arising. So we have it to where one by one, we eventually start to see people dying off from this milk guy. We have Aisha being killed, Kelly being killed, Nathan ends up becoming a vegetable, and so Simon ends up getting stabbed by this dairy guy trying to protect Curtis, because Curtis evidently is a person that does not process dairy or whatever well. He's a uh, God, what was it called? It's not gluten free, but it's the other thing where you can't process dairy products all that well. That's what Curtis cannot do. He doesn't do milk products or dairy or whatever it is, which is the perfect defense of this character. So we have it to where this dairy character is to run off, and Simon is to tell Curtis, dude, you need to go back in time to prevent this guy from getting to all of us because every single one of the people end up getting killed. Nikki ends up getting killed because she ends up teleporting into the room where Kelly and uh, where Kelly and all the other girls are being killed, and so on and so forth. So Curtis goes back in time to find this dairy guy, and they end up knocking him out and killing him. And so, because he also was a part of this storm too, and he ended up working at this dairy place where eventually he just started to win people over by manipulating milk and won over some girl that he ends up killing, and so on and so forth. So, moving on. So, we have it to where Dairy Guy is dead. So this is to basically push on to say, hey guys, your community service is now 100% completely over, and now everybody's thinking, oh crap, what am I going to do after this now? So the very last episode is to take place 3 months after the very last episode. So the very last episode is to see that Nathan is doing some community service still where he is to be some Santa Claus begging for money. And so this entire episode is to be a Christmas theme, and we seemingly find out that there's a guy that can buy and sell powers to people. And so we have it to where Aisha goes to this guy to sell off her powers because she doesn't want them anymore. And so eventually, one by one, we have almost the entire team all trying to sell off their power. And we have it to where Simon is like, God, you guys are stupid. You guys are selling all your powers off. Why? We eventually have some guy who's also claiming that he is Jesus reborn, and so he's swaying people to go and get money for him, only so he can take said money and buy yet another power to make him even much more powerful, because this guy is buying and selling powers. So this guy has the money, he's buying more power. So we eventually have it to where this is coming to a head, to having eventually this Jesus character wanting to forcibly want people to even rob and steal to get money for him. And so this robber is to go to Curtis's bar to steal money from him, and Nikki ends up getting shot in the process, which Curtis no longer has his rewind power, and so we have it to where Curtis ends up going to this guy and wanting a refund on his power, and so we end up having this guy saying, well, that's great and all, but we can't do that anymore. Or I can't give you back your power. I can't return you back your power because somebody wanted your, excuse me for a second. Somebody wanted your power. Somebody wanted to go far back in time to be able to kill Hitler, so sorry, I can't give you back your power. Somebody wanted it. So we eventually have it to where we end up having also Nathan kind of making out with some pregnant woman, and eventually this pregnant woman is eventually going to give birth towards the tail end of this episode. So we have it to where seemingly Nathan and the group all have a filing cabinet full of money and to try to give to this Jesus character. And so this Jesus character uses his power to get this cabinet to come to him. And so this cabinet ends up going too hard into this Jesus character to smack into his head to basically kill this Jesus character. And so we have it to where this group kind of uses their power of ingenuity to kill this character. And so we have it to where eventually the group starts to realize that, hey, how about we all go and all buy back our powers from this guy? We have ways of being able to steal enough money to be able to get our powers back, so let's get them back because Curtis wants to go back in time to have it to where Nikki did not die. So as the group goes to this guy, they start to realize, you know what? Instead of getting our own powers back, what if we can get better powers back? Or what if we can get better powers? What if we can get more powers? What if we can get like all kinds of things? And so we end up having it to where this bargainer guy is saying, okay, hey, who wants to step up? And so we have Kelly who goes on and is to say, hey, I want to go first. And so Kelly ends up going, and that's how they end this second season, with us not exactly knowing what power is going to be with who, which is going to, I'm sure, go back to I think the third season is going to be like the first season, where we have to have an entire episode dedicated to certain characters to see what exactly their powers are. And then eventually it's going to be, oh, okay, well, this is the bad guy for this season or whatever. And so I thought that this episode was really interesting. I really liked this approach. There was a lot of interesting stories being done within this season. There was a lot of interesting approaches to villains in these episodes, which I really did like. So, with that, I'm going to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody.